We hear a lot about how coaching works, and it really, really does. But the truth is, you don't always have someone with you to coach you, but you do always have yourself. Coming up next on the Successful Women Think Differently podcast, I'm going to teach you a very simple way to coach yourself through any challenge and get an answer that can pull you forward. Our lives are full of opportunities and they're also full of challenges. And the path to successfully navigating challenges isn't always clear. Sometimes there are hard conversations we have to have. There are, strategies we have to come up with to figure out how to push through fears or deal with people. Sometimes there are habits we need to overcome. And those habits oftentimes can make or break our success. At the end of the day, what we really need is to be able to be resilient no matter what's happening, no matter what's coming our way. And coaching is a great tool for resilience. I, over the years, have had many, many coaches. Coaching has transformed my life, but I can actually tell you that I have gained more through self-coaching than even coaching with some of my best coaches. And I think the reason is because I always have me, right? So I've had the opportunity to coach myself far more than anyone else has coached me. And so what does that mean? What does it mean when you coach yourself? It means that you pause and reflect, that you ponder some of those powerful questions that maybe otherwise you wouldn't ponder because you're just searching for answers. You're asking other people. You're looking at what someone else has done rather than getting quiet and saying things like, what is this challenge trying to teach me? Or what's the message in this? Or what options haven't I considered? And I have found that when I get quiet and I coach myself, oftentimes I begin connecting dots between challenges and opportunities. I gain clarity, and very importantly, that is where I often find my courage, because as I get quiet, as I ponder, as I gain wisdom from just paying attention and being fully present with what's happening, I'm far more intentional about how I move forward. So I just want to share a very kind of simple approach that you can take to self-coach. Self-coaching is such a big part of what I've intended to do my entire career. From my first book, I have always put a lot of self-coaching questions in my books. And the reason I think is because I'm just very practical. But ultimately, to me, inspiration is about doing something different. You are inspired to act differently, to show up differently. So when I'm speaking to you on this podcast or from the stage, or I am writing in a book or a blog or in my weekly newsletter, my hope always is that you don't just feel good from what you read or hear me say. You don't just go, oh, that was a great idea. But instead you say, here's what I can do differently, and here's what I'm going to do it. And therefore, I have always incorporated powerful questions, coaching questions into how I communicate, because I want to see you do something different that leads you deeper and deeper into a more fulfilling or richer life, a more courageous life. And ultimately, successful women, successful people in general, think differently. And often one of the ways they think differently is they don't just look for answers, but they peel back a few steps and they say, what question should I be asking? It's often those right questions that will push you far beyond anything you would have thought of if you were just looking for answers. I think coaching is such a great resilience skill that it should be taught. It should be taught in schools. I think parents should understand how to coach and teach their kids how to pause when they're dealing with a challenge, to really cultivate the skill of pausing, reflecting, and coaching. We can all use it. So there's a bit of a thought shift. And so I want to give you just a basic framework. And I want you to think for a moment about a challenge that you might be dealing with. It could be something in a relationship. It could be something in your work or your finances or your health. It could even be in your emotional or spiritual life. I want you to just think for a moment about what challenge is in front of you. And your challenge actually could even be rooted in an opportunity, like something good could be happening, but it's conjuring up fear for you or hesitation, even though you're excited about it, right? That's still a challenge. So, simple framework for coaching yourself. One, you want to identify what's the problem or opportunity that I need an answer to, right? Identify what that is, get clarity about it. If it's a boundary that needs to be set, write down what that boundary is. If it is a conversation that needs to be had or a relationship improved, or maybe the challenge in front of you is moving to the next level in your career or with your finances, whatever it is, identify it. A lot of times we're dealing with challenges and we don't actually pinpoint what the challenge is. It's a simple step, but that's a part of self-coaching, identifying the problem that needs to be solved. And then secondly, simply get quiet and reflect on what you want to see happen. This is key because oftentimes we focus on the problem much too long. We see the obstacle, we concentrate on the obstacle, we talk about the obstacle, we complain about the obstacle, we fear the obstacle, and we stay right there. Coaching is about moving from where you are, right, in front of that obstacle, that challenge, that problem. It's about moving from where you are to where you really want to be. And so reflecting on what you want to see happen is really important because what you're doing is saying, I'm here right now, and this is where I want to be. I'm here with this challenge. Here's where I would like to be. And you want to be able to get quiet and reflect on that, because if you over-focus on the problem, it tends to grow. Oftentimes it feels bigger and bigger, and you lose sight of what you actually want. That's why one of my favorite coaching questions, very simply, is what do you want? Even if you can't change the circumstances, I bet there's a way you'd like to show up. Maybe you can't change what's happening, but you'd like to feel less stress and more peace in the situation. Perhaps you can't change that person, but you'd like to change how you're feeling every day when you need to deal with that person, right? So when you get quiet, you have time to reflect on that. It's not so much that we can always dictate change, but we can change from within how we show up in the circumstance, how we are thinking about the circumstance. And when we do that, we change how we feel in the circumstance. So you identify the problem, then you identify what you want to see happen. And then third, you identify the fears, the habits, the distractions that are keeping you from getting to that place. Fears, habits, distractions. When I launched the Successful Women's Academy 3 years ago, this was a huge focus. Teaching women specifically how to self-coach, how to get clarity and overcome the fears, habits, and the distractions that keep them from living more fulfilling lives. Oftentimes, we don't even identify what they are. We just accept that there are fears, habits, and distractions, and we keep letting them get in the way. But when you start identifying them, when you start calling them out, the opportunity presents itself for you to conquer what you are willing to confront. So identifying the fears, habits, and distractions are key. And sometimes it's it's one fear, it's one habit. If you can get that out of the way, it's one distraction. And sometimes it's multiples. And then listen. Listen for what you sense are the potential options for moving through or moving around those fears, habits, and distractions. What's the obstacle? And you really just begin coaching yourself with simple questions. I'm going to give you a few to start with, some of my favorite coaching questions. So as I mentioned, you want to identify the problem. So asking yourself, what's the challenge? What's the challenge or what's the opportunity that's creating stress or creating a challenge for me here? Um, what do I want? Right? What do you want? Stop focusing on what you don't. Ask, what do I want? What's in the way? What's really in the way? Not those surface level, oh, I don't have enough time, I don't have enough money, I don't have enough, you fill in the blank. Those are often surface level because we easily can say these are the issues. But what really is the reason that you don't have enough time? Is it really true that you don't have the money? Sometimes, if we get quiet, we'll notice that if we really want something, we will find a way. We will look at how we're using existing resources and we'll move some things around. We will stop doing certain things so that we can reclaim the resources we need to do the thing that we really want to do. So when you ask what's in the way, be honest. This is critical for coaching yourself, to be brutally honest with yourself about what the answer is. In that relationship, you ask what's in the way. You could say it's the other person, but what if it's also you? What if you were able to accept that person where they are and stop insisting that they have to do something different? I'm not, of course, talking about situations where people are just violating boundaries or being abusive. I'm talking about situations where maybe you're being controlling. Maybe you could ease up a bit. Maybe you could stop letting them push your buttons and give them the reaction that they want, and you could deactivate some buttons and make a decision that next time they show up in that way, you're not going to react like that. Maybe you're not going to say anything. Maybe you're going to shut down the conversation. So asking what's in the way is a biggie because you're identifying those fears, those habits, and those distractions. And then what are your wisest options for moving through this obstacle? What are your wisest options? One of my favorite coaching questions ever comes from Andy Stanley, pastor, best-selling author. Did a whole series called a couple of years ago called, well, actually, I don't know if this is what it was called, but this was the question. What is the wise thing to do, right? Given your past circumstances, your current hopes and dreams, your future hopes and aspirations, what is the wise thing to do? Oh my goodness, I've used that question over and over and over again because oftentimes the answers that we are seeking are about what the easiest thing is to do, what the fastest thing is to do, what the cheapest thing is to do, what the most convenient thing is to do. But what is the wise thing to do is a very different question. And often you will have a different answer. You'll realize, yeah, that's the cheapest option, but that's going to come back and bite me because it's not going to last long. Oh, that's the easiest option. Yeah, but it's going to be pretty temporary. And then I'm going to have to put forth more energy and effort, probably more than if I just made the wise decision right now, right? So it really is a question that helps you begin looking at your options for overcoming the obstacle. And if you don't know any options, if you find yourself going, I don't know, ask yourself, where might I find these options? Who's been there and done that? Who might I brainstorm with? Like, if you don't know what to do, sometimes the best answer, and in self-coaching, you can find this, is to say, okay, who's been there, done that? Even if I don't know them personally, how might I do the research? That becomes your next step. Actually seeking out the resources or the people or the examples. And so when we get quiet and we slow down, we realize we have more answers than we realize. From my perspective as a woman of faith, when I get quiet, when I pray, I always hear an answer. God always shows up. And it's often in feelings of peace or a nudge that I get, an idea that comes from getting quiet. So that's it. I know life is busy, things happen. Sometimes we get anxious. We start asking everybody else what they think about our circumstance. Sometimes fear takes over, and we don't stop and pause to get the clarity we need. But you can always coach you. You can always stop, get quiet, notice what the problem is, identify what those fears and distractions are. What is it that you really want? Right? Even if it's in how you show up in the situation, even when you can't actually change the circumstances. And what are your options? What could you do? How could you maybe just experiment? Even if you don't say, I'm doing this forever, you can say, try this week. And I'm going to make another coaching appointment with myself and see how it's going. You know, I always say on this podcast that how far you go is largely determined by how much you're willing to grow. And self-coaching is that resilience tool that fosters personal growth. Every single month inside the Successful Women's Academy, as I mentioned, we talk about things like this. New content, I give you the tools you need to coach yourself, to conquer fears, habits, and distractions. You will find yourself in a community of hundreds of like-minded women from all over the U.S. and around the world, which just amazes me. Just encouraging women. It's a very special community. If you know that there are fears, habits, and distractions that are threatening to get in the way of your biggest dreams, of your fulfillment, that sometimes sabotage your joy and keeping you from being your best version of yourself, just check out SWA, Successful Women's Academy. I would love to support you there as your coach. And that is the mission. In fact, coming up, I'm going to be hosting the Vision Board Challenge. You may remember me doing that in January. If you were around then, we're going to do a 2.0 version of the Vision Board Challenge. It's free. I would love to see you there. I want you to check out the details there in the show notes. We had thousands of people show up last year for the Vision Board Challenge. I think we had 8,000 people in the Facebook group alone. So you can join for free and start off the new year with a proven tool that can help you walk straight into the vision that you want in this upcoming year and close the gap between where you are and where you really want to be. So if you want more info on that, just go to valerieburton.com/Vision Board Challenge 2024. So thanks so much for joining me for this episode. I just want to encourage you, coach yourself. You've always got you. Slow down, reflect, and ask the kinds of questions that will get you the answers you want. Don't forget, how far you go is largely determined by how much you're willing to grow. I'll talk to you next time.